It was so good. And there's a couple things that I took away from that. And it's not necessarily Mavs things, but I think Mavs fans will be interested in them. One of them, uh, Mark Cuban was going through and he said, all right, rapid fire. Tell me what you think about this personality or this sports figure. And he would say like Barry Switzer. And then they brought up the whole interview with him and Barry Switzer when he was punching him in the arm and all that stuff. I don't even know if I'd ever seen that because I didn't grow up here. And then he went through like just different, Nolan Ryan, and he went through different sports figures. He came to Jerry Jones. And when asked to explain Jerry Jones, talk about Jerry Jones, Dale Hansen said, I actually like the man, which is kind of a funny thing to say. He's like, I actually like the man. I've gone after him, blah, blah, blah. But he said, I wish he wasn't the GM of my favorite team. I wish he could get satisfaction from just being the owner of the team. And sitting there watching this, I was watching it on my iPad on the side, and I'm just sitting there looking at it, and he's sitting across from Mark Cuban in the old number 7 lounge in the AAC, right above the practice court. Like, you can see the Mavs practice court and everything. And he said that specific thing to Mark Cuban, and that kind of blew my mind a little bit, because isn't that exactly what we're going through right now? Just a little bit. He doesn't have the title, Mark Cuban, but we're seeing that right now happen with the Mavericks.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans' eyes were opened this offseason, and even maybe prior to that, they felt like Mark Cuban in a lot of ways was just like Jerry Jones in the fact that he wants to have full control and autonomy of his team to make all the final decisions, whether it be business-wise or in this case basketball-wise. And I think the way things went down with Donnie Nelson and Rick Carlisle, and then things being brought full circle with Jason Kidd being brought back, Dirk Nowitzki being brought back to this organization, a lot of folks felt like this is Jerry Jones 2.0 with Mark Cuban. And for a lot of folks, that wasn't necessarily the greatest realization, because it's like, yeah, you know what? You're right. He does run things just like Jerry Jones. And, that's how feelings get hurt. And for a lot of Mavs fans, that wasn't necessarily great this offseason.
There's been many times I wish I knew what Mark Cuban or anybody was thinking. But that was one of the times when I just wish that I would have known what Mark Cuban was thinking when he said that, because it applies to it. And I think if you or me ever ask Mark Cuban in some kind of scrum or something, we asked him, hey, when you did that interview with Dale Hansen and he was talking about Jerry Jones and making the end of the day decisions for the team, I think he would just play it off as, well, I'm not the GM. Nico's the GM, and Jerry Jones is like, the difference for a lot of people that don't follow the Cowboys or don't follow football is that Jerry Jones is literally the GM, right? Like that's his title. Like, there is not a person that is like the GM, right? And so it is a little bit different title-wise and all that kind of stuff, the difference between what's going on with the Mavericks and the Cowboys. But can you explain that any further for people that may not know about, American football?
Yeah, I think for Jerry Jones, he feels like he owns the team. He should be able to make all the decisions when it comes to the business of the Cowboys, or the football decisions when it comes to what the personnel looks like. And for most teams, that isn't necessarily the case. You separate the owner and the general manager and the president of operations. For Jerry Jones, he feels like if I'm going to be the one writing the checks, I should be the one making the final decisions. And for Cowboys fans,
sound familiar?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's a point of frustration for Cowboys fans for a long time, much like how Mark Cuban feels. If I'm going to be the one actually paying these players, cutting the checks, I should ultimately be the one who makes the final decisions on what this team looks like. And folks don't necessarily feel that way. They say, well, maybe you should just get out of the way, let basketball people make basketball decisions. You cut the checks, and we'll be able to put a roster together that's going to do the best to win basketball games. But Mark Cuban, Jerry Jones, and folks like them don't necessarily feel that way. And that's their prerogative. As those guys who own their teams, that is their full prerogative, and it's the frustration of fans of those who like those teams that are kind of tired of it at this point.
Yeah. So in all fairness, though, we still, I guess we should still give him a chance with the new regime, with Nico Harrison and all that stuff, to try and figure out if it's going to be the exact same way. Now, you can see my face on YouTube if you're watching us on YouTube. I mean, you don't just, I mean, this is the first time he's brought in his own guy, basically, as making the player decisions, the personnel decisions. So I'm not super, encouraged to think that it would be different, but we'll see. So we'll see with Mark